So this set was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. I've been meaning to make this video for a very long time, and when I saw this set, I was like, okay, it's time. This video just has to be made. It needs to be said. So here's why you should absolutely not be a technique cyborg. So in this video, we're going to get into range of motion and control. And then the third part is going to be a slightly different topic, which might be a little bit more controversial, but it needs to be said for sure. So one of the reasons why I haven't made this video for so long, even though I definitely disagree with a lot of the training principles that Dr. Mike puts out and uses this technique cyborg series to emphasize, is that I never want to feel like I'm punching down. I never want to be doing harm. I never want to have like that cyber bullying type of feel to my content. And so I want to be very clear that I have nothing against any of these individuals. It's more just a disagreement with this type of technique. It's a technical video, nothing against these particular people. And I don't want to see people coming from my video, going to their videos, being like, nerd, or anything like that. So with that out of the way, I want to get into the first part of the video, and that is load management versus excessive control. In general, if you are able to move the weight with such speed that it looks like a warm-up, it's not a working set. It's not a working weight. You should go up in weight. So if you're doing, let's say, some kind of machine and you're absolutely slamming the machine at the bottom of the range of motion, it's probably too light. If you're rebounding off of the bottom, it's probably just not enough resistance and you'd be better served going up in weight. You should be aggressive during the concentric, but if the weight is so light that that aggression carries you through the entire range of motion, it's probably just not going to be particularly effective for hypertrophy. Another example, if you are squatting and it looks like at the top of the rep you're going to take off and maybe do a jump squat, it's just not a suitable resistance for hypertrophy. It's just not. If you're doing some kind of assisted pull-up and you're able to adjust your grip at the top of the rep, maybe you should just be doing normal pull-ups. Maybe you've graduated from assisted pull-ups. You might say that, oh, but I get a better mind-muscle connection. I get a better pump. Okay, but you still have to add weight to the bar at some point. You might have to sacrifice some control, some contraction, some mind-muscle connection at some point if you want to add weight, because you're going to have to add weight at some point. And it's that fitness pendulum. It goes back and forth. This is a response to the ego lifting, the partials, people lifting too heavy. Well, this is just a different form of ego. You're attaching your ego not to the weight lifted, but to the range of motion, to the control, and thus you are overemphasizing these variables at the expense of others. There are dozens of variables that go into a set, and if you try to optimize one at the expense of everything else, you're going to end up with a shitty set and shitty results. And I've seen comments time and time again on Dr. Mike's posts that said stuff like, well, why are all these technique cyborg people small? And again, I don't want to feel like I'm bullying or punching down, but I have noticed that trend. Most of the guys that are being highlighted are small, using small weights. Yes, they are controlled. Yes, they often use gymnast level of range of motion. But I think ultimately, if you want to get big, training in this style is not the way to go, especially if you are natural. And I'm not the, oh, you gotta go heavy, bro. Like, I've gotten shit for my levels of strength before, and I do think that you can get a lot out of moderate weights. However, light weights, when the set looks very easy, even if it's controlled, even with impressive ranges of motion, probably won't get you jacked. And the idea of mastering a certain level of weight before going up is very appealing, especially if you are very risk averse. But ultimately, I think sometimes that leads to people being much too timid with their progressive overload and even with their levels of effort. Progressive overload and effort, those two things will get you very fucking far. And if you're missing those, you just won't. And controlling light weights is easy. By definition, if you can control heavy weights, that is where I am most impressed. If something is a 5-rep max and you're really controlling it and it's tough and it's hard from the start, fair enough. But if you're doing the first rep and it absolutely flies up and you're able to hold the row in the contracted position, you're probably just not challenging the muscle. And you might justify it by saying, oh, but I trained to failure. See, I missed this tiny little fraction at the top. I wasn't able to get like full extension or something. Well, you're probably not actually stressing the muscle nearly as much as you think. Maybe you feel it, maybe you get a pump, but I think in terms of progression and in terms of what actual big natural lifters do to get jacked, it's just way off the mark. And I'm all for aggression. I'm all for trying to maximize the speed of the concentric. I'm all for horse-cocking big weights. Bugenhagen fans know. Those who aren't Bugenhagen fans are probably kind of weirded out by now, but you can get from the context like what horse-cocking some big weight means, right? It's kind of in the name, right? And so yes, if it's a leg press, if it's a squat, if it's a deadlift, if it's a curl, if it's pretty much anything in the gym, you should be moving with aggression, with intention. It's just that the weight will be heavy enough that it won't be flying up, because if it's flying up, you're now training for explosiveness, not hypertrophy. Those are sort of two different roads. I think Dr. Mike's content really appeals to people who like to have a lot of control over what they do in the gym. They like to have numbers, they like to have spreadsheets, they like to have everything managed and micromanaged and pico managed. And so I thought about giving a bar speed or rep speed, either in terms of how many seconds it takes to complete a rep. If it's faster than that, it's going to be useless, or maybe in meters per second. You can also measure that with certain devices. But I specifically will not give you numbers, you fucking nerds. Because I am also a nerd. I like Dungeons and Dragons. I like computer games. I like spreadsheets. I like numbers. I like geeking out about this shit as much as anyone. But it's not productive. You need to feel it. You need to feel when a rep is too easy and you're like, okay, well, I can go heavier than I thought. You don't have to think, oh, well, shit, I better call the police and get a radar on me. No, you need to feel it in your bones, in your balls, in your brain, where you move a weight and you think, nah, that's not enough. I can go up. And eventually you need to go up. So on the days you can go up, go up. And in general, if people are commenting on your posts, like, is this a warm-up or a working set? Are you injured? Why are you training this way? I thought you would be stronger than this. I thought you'd be at least using more than 75 pounds on a row. You probably have some major issues with your training theories. And I know people are going to be like, oh, but it's so much safer to do this kind of training. Maybe not. In general, lifting weights is very, very safe, and I don't think you have to have ultra strict, super controlled technique in order to have a reasonable risk of injury. Now let's get into range of motion, and let's just start with the most controversial statement out there, where Dr. Mike said that Ronnie would be bigger if he had squatted deeper.
Fuad, fuck up out of here. Look at this shit. What the
No,
fuck
no,
is this?
get the fuck out of here. What is he doing here? What is he doing? His ass is touching his fucking heels.
Please, dude, please.
Come
There's
on, get
levels
the
to
fuck
this.
out of
Come
here.
on.
Get
Come on,
out of
man.
here. What is he doing here? Okay, well, I'm not in the same camp as you guys.
And if you say this about some random schmuck on the street, okay, like, fair enough. But we're talking about the GOAT here. How much hubris do you have to not even say maybe, but just Ronnie would be bigger if he squatted deeper? When I first heard this, at first it blew my mind, but then I realized this is the new Dr. Mike that we're talking about, who kind of just says random shit to get people riled up in order to drive engagement, to drive subscriptions, to drive how much money he makes. So, in that context, it kind of makes perfect sense. And if you look at a lot of very, very jacked individuals, both enhanced and natural, they don't train with extreme ranges of motion, usually. They're not doing deadlifts where they're in this hyper deficit and they're getting this ultra lengthened position. Not really. They're usually not doing dumbbell flies or dumbbell bench presses where their elbows are touching the ground behind them and shit like that. You just don't see that very often. I think there might be some value in this type of stuff as like a prehab movement, but in terms of your weight training, often you have to sacrifice so much weight on the bar that it's just not challenging the other part of the range of motion. And I don't see something wrong with maybe not having as much of a range of motion and yet using more weight. There's often a trade-off between full range of motion, but really light weights, and maybe squatting only gasp to parallel, but using significantly more loading. And I don't think we can necessarily say, oh, well, more range of motion equals more gains. Well, you have to keep in mind that the loading is going to change as well. And often in terms of progression, you're going to see a difference too. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that you might not necessarily need to absolutely standardize your technique. The idea that you need to be a cyborg, a robot, that you have to move like you are a machine, I just don't think is actually true. I think small fluctuations in how you move is totally fine, reasonable, natural, and might actually be beneficial in some ways. For example, if you're doing pretty much any type of row, I think that if you go to failure where you can't quite get full range of motion, and then you just keep going, getting slightly less range of motion, I think that can be very, very productive. I mean, the first set shown in this video, the guy was doing paused Smith bent over rows, pausing at the top. So pausing at full extension and fully contracted. That means that you're not really training other parts of the range of motion. I would rather see more weight, slightly less range of motion, and then perhaps even going beyond failure where you're actually targeting other parts of the range of motion other than just that. And often telling people that either they need to have this perfect technique or it's really important that they have this flawless, ultra-controlled, full range of motion type of lifting, it leads to obsessive overthinking with their technique, and it actually does, dare I say, kill people's gains. I've had many coaching clients where I could tell exactly who they had been following based on how they were moving, and yeah, often they were just not making progress. And people will often cope, and they'll see some bro over there moving some big weight but using momentum, and they'll be like, oh, that's bad form. I'll say like, oh, he's bigger than you though. Oh, steroids. No, actually, he's natural. I've talked to him for a long time. I'm pretty sure he's natural. Genetics. Oh, it's just genetics. If it's not steroids, it's just genetics. But that technique, no, it's no good. Maybe his form is better than yours. Maybe using momentum is not necessarily bad form in all cases. Maybe using some momentum can actually even out the resistance curve, so you're getting more out of the movement. Maybe it actually helps your progression. Maybe it allows you to put more effort into the movement. Maybe it allows you to trend closer to failure or even beyond failure and extend the set, getting more stimulus from the set. You ever think about these things? But no, it's just control, range of motion, and nothing else matters. And I think it's very easy to have your identity kind of be wrapped up in one style of training. Oh, you're a hit guy. Oh, you only do one set. I don't do more than one set, bro. Okay, well, maybe you'd be better if you did more than one set. Now your identity is control. Like, you're the guy who's controlled. Oh, you're the guy who has range of motion. Oh, you're the volume guy. Like, I was the volume guy for a while, and that was to my detriment. Like, I actually went down the wrong path because I got too caught up in optimizing one variable to the detriment of others. You don't want to be the failure guy, because then you do a set with one rep in reserve, and people are like, oh, I thought you were the failure guy. Well, you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be any guy. You want to be the guy who knows how to manipulate all the variables and how they interact in order to get the most from your training. Finally, for part 3, and I wasn't sure if I was going to include this part, but fuck it. I think it's clear that Dr. Mike and Renaissance Periodization, their content has changed considerably over the past year or two compared to before, and not in a good way. It's clear that views are top priority, driving engagement, posting content that will get a lot of comments and thus be pushed out to more people through the algorithm. And a lot of this content, I think, is not what they actually believe. It is just to drive engagement. And in general, if you see in comment sections, oh, engagement trap or clickbait, or, oh, this is just posted so we can comment how ridiculous it is, it's probably true. And I think a lot of this is just to drive views, to drive subscriptions, and ultimately to drive money. And some people, they just can't handle social media. Because we see everything. We see which posts blow up, which posts get a lot of engagement, which posts ultimately drive money to whatever website you have. And some people, they see, oh, when I do this, cha-ching, I make more money. I'm going to do more of this. I'm going to fearmonger more. I'm going to post ridiculous shit that a lot of people comment on and more people see it and I make more money. Because we see everything. We see all the metrics. And so it's a monkey pulling that lever. Just, oh, I do this, I make money. I do this, I make money. I do this, I make money. And it feels fucking intoxicating making money. It feels amazing. It feels great. But you have to remember why you started this shit. And at a certain point, it kind of becomes a little bit embarrassing. And Chris Williamson had a quote on his page recently where it was something along the lines of, the world has two types of people: those who don't know how to start making money and those who don't know when to stop. And Dr. Mike, I think it's time to stop. In fact, I think it was time to stop several months ago. You've had your fun, you're set for life. The Lambo jokes are a little bit weird now that you can actually afford to buy many, many Lambos from the multiple millions of dollars you've made. It's time to stop. And this kind of reminds me of Greg Doucette. And I know, Dr. Mike, you probably fucking hate that comparison, but there's definitely grains of truth here. He saw when he yelled at the camera in this fake voice, he got more comments and likes and engagement when he posted ridiculous titles like diet soda is better than you for water, this type of shit. He got more views, he made more money, he sold more of his cookbooks. I think you're going down the same road. I think this is probably not a road you want to go down, and so maybe think about why you started posting videos in the first place. To help people. And I know for a fact that I'm not the only person in the industry who notices this type of stuff. And if you're being held hostage or something, there's some guy with a gun under the table pointed at your dick who's like, you better make 8 mil this year or I'll blow your dick off. Okay, fair enough. But that's probably not the case. I mean, maybe, but probably not. Anyway, to recap, balance all of your training variables together. Don't overemphasize any one or two of them. So balance your range of motion and your control with your loading and your progressive overload and your effort. And then balance making money, which we all have to do, with not posting ridiculous and kind of embarrassing stuff. Just my 2 cents. All right, hope you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.